for those of you who are new, this is our monthly Future Proof Masterclass, where all the community of future proofers come together, and we have a guest expert or a number of people who talk about things that you can do to future proof your career and future proof your life. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, and if you have just happened to come via LinkedIn or another place, then feel free to go to futureprooflab.com and sign up, and we'll send you information about future. So this is a really interesting and wonderful talk, which was actually inspired by last month, where we talked about legal, and somebody said, what about Web3 and blockchain? Why don't you do, Diana, something about that? Because, you know, we want to know how to future-proof our careers. And I thought that would be fantastic, because I'm somebody who's really interested in emerging tech. I've done the Web2, S-curve, and I'm really interested in the metaverse and blockchain and DAOs, and have been writing about it. But it didn't occur to me to actually do a masterclass about it. So I turned to Meredith here and said, hey, you've been talking a lot about this. And she's one of our Future Proof tribe. And we said, let's not do a 101, because there are a million people doing blockchain 101. And I think I've attended, most of them. And this isn't going to get you on and get you a wallet for blockchain. This is really there's a lot of emerging tech coming down the pike. And for those of us who have jobs that aren't specifically in that realm, how can we keep up? And one of the things I know for me is that I come at it from a sort of media and education bent. We have Scott Bunny. Can you say hello, Scott? Hello.
I sure can. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me, Diana. Good evening from Sydney, Australia.
Yeah.
Oh,
Scott,
I've got FOMO, Scott. That's where I sort of come from as well.
It's super late at night. So thanks so much for coming and being with us. And you have come from sort of financial recruiting, and I know that you have been in Web3 as well.
Very, very true. Do you want me to give you a quick 30 seconds of what I have done? Yeah, cool.
That'd be great.
I mean, I had a long background in recruitment. I still do a little bit senior people in our superannuation and pensions and investment sector, a little bit into the Asia Pacific region. And for me, I think I'm okay at building relationships, and sometimes I will recruit people who are product people or consultants or whatever, who are brilliant at designing and building things, but I never got close to, emerging technologies or a new way of doing things or an emerging asset class, and blockchain and crypto are all of those things. And Web3, I think, is something that everyone from the big tech giants, and Web3 is really going to disrupt the wealth that they have created. But Web3 is a really critical part of being future proof. So that's just my little entree as to why I think it's super cool. And to me, it is about the transfer of, or the return really, of ownership of your data and value that comes with that data back to you, the individual. And Meredith, I'm sure you're going to explore that more.
Yeah. So Meredith, this is something that you've put some time and effort into, and we have another friend who didn't make it, who's in LA. She was CEO of Artsy for Asia, Gen Prep. But Meredith, you were the one who was like, yes, I'm it, and I'm interested in it. But you're a very structured person. You're all over it, and you were like, yes, this is so cool. And you've even offered to sort of put together a cheat sheet that people will get via email afterwards. But what's your story?
So my story is, really, I'm a marketing lifer. I've always been in various marketing roles, but tending to be in traditional financial services as we know it today, TradFi, just to get the lingo going for everyone. And started off mostly in the payments world in the first part of my career in Australia, and loyalty programs with Visa, sort of a Visa outsourced partner called Pinpoint. Worked for Citi and credit cards, and then had a little bit of a moral issue with that. So I then went over to the other dark side, which is institutional asset management, where I started that part of my career in Hong Kong, and basically got to a stage where I wasn't excited anymore. I did a small stint, or a few years stint in a B2B tech startup, more focused on corporate learning and development. And that's when I went, I'm not going back to financial services. I feel like I do need this sea change. I started then on my formal training on sustainability through the Cambridge Institute of Sustainability Leadership. And from there, I got this crazy opportunity with Elliptic, where I cut my teeth on crypto and blockchain. What I started to realize only in the last 6 months is where I want to be and where I want to head my career is to join those two things together, my purpose, my profession, into sustainable blockchain. And that's where I'm at. So I'm really at the start of that particular part of my journey, where I want to spend really the rest of my career if I can. But I'm early stages as well. So I'm also bringing together a very traditional background from, and then, adding this sort of blockchain, Web3, digitalization of everything component to my career after I've had a first introduction over the last couple of years. So I'm not actually a blockchain, crypto, digital asset expert. I have worked and do work with a lot of incredible minds in that space, but I'm helping them try to explain that, make sense of it, for those organizations and people who are wanting to make a transition, which is really just embracing the future, because we are in a world of a digital era now, and it's not going away, it's here to stay. So, we all embraced internet at one time. If anyone can remember that period, I remember my first email. But on that, this is the next era of our, of sort of the industrial revolution, if you like.
Yeah, I've heard it called, one of the biggest wealth transfers of our generation. So I feel like it's important. And I think that if I look at some of the people on this call, I see, extraordinary talent across education and legal and design and finance and retail. And we do have one fairly serious expert in the future proofers in terms of blockchain, but she's, I think, currently backpacking through Panama. I don't know what that says about the future of crypto, but
well, I met Melody, actually. I met Melody last week or so via a Zoom call, and it was really great to hear her story, but I'm sure she'll tune in to the future.
Another time.
Of course, at some point. Yeah.
But I think that it's, to a certain extent, I always feel like it's good to have somebody who's sort of been through a journey and can talk about that rather than, the head of, rather than Satoshi Nakamoto himself, who I think we were going to have, but maybe he didn't show up. No.
Sorry,
so
got it
the big question to begin, the big question is, like, why should we care, right? That a little bit of what we're talking about here. Is this something that people can afford to ignore and focus on other things? Why should we care no matter where we are in the world or in whatever industry?
Well, I suppose, let's just take a step back here. So, and look at, just a few foundational things. I think at the moment, there's the early innovators who have been well established and sort of spawned this new, digital asset, crypto, blockchain era. And the reason, just for the broader group, that I use those three terms is because they're often used interchangeably. They all have a slightly different meaning, but what they're all founded on is a new technology. So blockchain is a technology And on that blockchain technology, you can utilize it for many different things. The one that we probably all know the best is we hear about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, Ether, NFTs, very retail oriented orientations of either transfer of value, so cryptocurrency, or transfer of ownership. So if you think about a piece of digital art from a creator, I could be that digital artist, the creator they're called, and then Diana, you say, I'm going to buy that piece of art, or I say, I'm going to gift it to you. And so I literally transfer that digital footprint over on blockchain technology. So that's sort of a bit of a technical explanation, but basically what's happening is, to Scott's point, when the internet became a more mainstream thing, Web 1 was very much about, there's a few content creators. It was quite static, lots of just splash pages, usually by companies trying to get a message out, or directories of research, very almost DOS type looking web. Web 2, which really spawned in the 2000s, early 2000s, became the era of more user-generated content, and has also been known to be called the participative social web. So basically social media as we know it in a more common term. Facebooks. I don't know if anyone remembers MySpace way back when, showing my age now.
I did CD-ROMs for a living, so you don't have to worry about that.
Oh, indeed. And now we've got the evolution of that is, obviously there's Instagram and Snapchat, and then LinkedIn even is probably a good one for this group. All of these things spawned in Web 2 era. And it's a lot about that user-generated content. So we're pushing out information, knowledge, thoughts, opinions, and so lots of community orientation with that. And then where Web 3 has come back to is almost like a first principles thing of, who am I as an individual? Who am I as a person? How do I want to share my data that I own? And who do I share it with? And how can I protect that and have privacy if I choose to? Or, how can I share willingly my own data rather than, a Google or a big sort of engine sharing it for me? Obviously, there's a lot around that and permission, but we're going into this sort of permissionless world where we as individuals are permissioning the sharing of our own knowledge, data, etc. So that is really where Web 3 is coming to. And when that comes to business, there's lots of different applications here. So it could be that, as a business, I want to transact directly with another counterparty. So at the moment, I'll just give you an example. I need to send some money to Australia from the UK. The number of banks, counterparties, intermediaries that go all along that till that, that cash in a sense lands in an Australian bank account, probably 3 days later. If I wanted to transfer, a sum of £100, it probably ends up about £60 in reality because everyone's taken their cut along the way. That is highly inefficient. So businesses.
So what I hear you saying is sort of, first of all, it's going to disrupt everything. So in all of the different industries that I see as I look at, Taya and Aisha and Darshan and Damien, and they're all in one row on my Zoom. But I think about, as a person in business, you need to think about that kind of disruption. As a person who's a creator, or even just, in a responsible owner of your own data and care about your privacy, that's an aspect which is almost more personal than professional, but can also be professional. Yeah, and then the third one is maybe sustainability. which I see. So for those of you who haven't, I popped a question in the chat, which is, what have all of you guys listening to dip your toe or full body into Web3? So Damien was talking about doing sustainable finance, and Watson has talked a little bit about currency and staking. But like in terms of your career, you know, what are some of the things you've done, and what are some of the worries that you have about like how you're going to keep up with all of this? I'd love to see that in the chat. And I'd love, and speaking to that anxiety, at least he feels that way to me, but I do see that in other people. Like, one of the things that I think you do really well, Meredith, is there's just information overload in particular about this topic. And we talked about it a little bit before. Like, how is it that I think there's one, how are we applying these technologies to business? So you talked a little bit about payments and the disruption there. And then the other one we'll go to next is how are we going to keep up? So
Sure.
should we start with business? What do you think?
So with business, at the end of the day, there are a lot of news headlines out there, and it's very, very noisy, quite often confusing. There's a lot of jargon and lingo that's associated with this sort of new world. And it's hard just to start making sense of it. And it starts to feel like you're already behind. The reality is that you're not. It's never too late to start. But when it comes to looking at news or media or information sources, the recommendation is get beyond the sensationalist headlines and often self-serving headlines, beyond just the rise and fall of the market. Bitcoin's going up at an incredible rate or down at a credible rate. It's used for nefarious purposes, to facilitate financial crime by bad actors. These are all really not the premise. Well, trading is one, but they're not really the premise of the technology. I would recommend looking at your own industries in their own trade news. So if you're in finance, look in fintech media. If you're in legal, look at a lot of the work that's being and the content that's being written by organizations like the Digital Chamber of Commerce in the US, or even the local regulators such as the Monetary Authority of Singapore. There's a huge amount that's going on in that market. So just whichever industry you're in, get to the business use cases by going to those credible sources. Just get beyond the retail news. If you really want to immerse yourself, there's a lot of crypto and blockchain oriented media. For me, like, I take a financial services orientation of that. So CoinDesk is a great source covering a number of things. Blockworks is another one. These are all, freely available online. And it's where I find my credible information. Still a few headlines here and there with some of them, but I think that trying to get to the use cases within your industry is really important. I'll give you a really quick example, actually, because this just came up this morning. My cousin's son is just starting his career. He studied law, and he started a new role for a smart contracts oriented or specialist law firm. I'd never heard of that a few years ago. Smart contracts, what are they? DAOs, 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 what are those? There is a huge amount of these things happening probably in your world already. So just tap into that.
Yeah, I think that that's good. And so tell me though, I started my journey in part by helping a group called Hashkey do training for people on tokenization and other things. And so I can put it, there's a tokenization, I'll pop it in the chat. But one of the things that happened was that suddenly I was on Discord, I was on Telegram, I was on, keeping up with everything. So I don't think that it's just easy enough. I'm on WhatsApp group for those of you in Hong Kong. There's like a bunch of NFT groups. Like, so what is that what you have to do? Or do you think that just sticking to the sort of bulge bracket, reports or news is enough? I feel like the old media, and I can say that because I'm part of it, is has this kind of filtered view, but then there's this whole nother group of information.
Well, in fact, we talked about this a little bit in our prep, but, thinking about the web 1, 2, and 3, this is a very web 2 sort of orientation. So one is going out and finding information, self-serving on, credible sources, news, associations, etc. But the other is, really learning through connecting. So going back to Web 2 social and community sites, LinkedIn is clearly, a key business forum to find other people in your space, or even in adjacent sectors. It doesn't have to always be from your own. Because a lot of this knowledge and applications of blockchain are potentially transferable. So I think the connection part is good. Like I have not long ago really started to focus my efforts, for example, on LinkedIn to connect meaningfully, with an actual message, with people that I'm starting to find are already focusing on crypto, blockchain, and sustainability. But I'm early days. I don't think I have that much to personally offer them in terms of knowledge. They're much more expert than me, but I've got to get over that kind of imposter syndrome. And I think that's probably what many people feel, that imposter syndrome. I don't know anything. Why would this person want to connect or talk to me? But I think at the end of the day, if you say I'm new to this, I want to learn, would you be open for a 15-20 minute, half an hour, no agenda, chat? I think a lot of people say yes, because we're all at the beginning of a long journey.
Yeah, I think that that's really nice, and I have found the same thing. Watson, did you have a question? You have your hand up, or a statement?
Yeah, I hope it's a question. So is one of if so I follow you on LinkedIn. Do you do some, I guess curation is the right point, of finding 2 articles a week that are at least vetted by the Meredith Odgers school of approval?
Which is to a very, very high standard.
Absolutely, yeah.
Watson, I do, but I have to admit, I'm actually inconsistent with doing that. There's some weeks where I don't post anything that I've personally curated. Other times, I sort of add some commentary on the top of a really great article just to share thoughts or summarize it. Like everyone, content curation takes time, and I often don't make enough time for that amongst, my other work. But
it's super helpful. And it's one of the things I just hope you get to touch on a bit is, as the technology becomes more sustainable, more kind of known, the innovators of the universe will find application that leverage those pieces. And you talked a little bit of, when we were talking a few weeks ago, about how in some countries it's a stabilizing force in terms of kind of currency. That's you have a lot more influence over where it goes. And I was really intrigued at that as an idea, where because you just know a lot more about where it goes due to the blockchain. So I'm just keen to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I guess where I'm linking up this sustainability with this new world of blockchain is, if you take the ESG sort of analogy, like there's people, there's the social side of things, there's economic, and then there's also environmental, applications. Supply chain management is a really good one for blockchain, because you can trace, things right back to the provenance if it's used properly. But on the one that you're talking about, Watson, if we look at sort of the unbanked around the world, a lot of, frontier or developing nations, we take it for granted that we have bank accounts. We can, tap and go to pay for something at the till, contactless. We've got effectively our bank in our phones. And, in a world where people can't get bank accounts, they don't even have the ID needed to open a bank account, or they're considered too risky. So, traditional financial institutions won't take them on as a customer. Cryptocurrency, because technically you really just need an email address and access to the internet. If you're going for a more unregulated type platform, but that's actually opening up so many opportunities for people in Africa, South America, where they do want to buy and sell goods. A basket weaver in Africa wants to distribute their product. How do they do that physically and sort of financially? They're turning to things like cryptocurrency, because they really just need that phone, email address, and the internet at the most very basic level, by the way. And we're seeing quite a lot of that also happening in South America, where there is some, just interesting geopolitics going on. So people sort of, bypassing the traditional banking system to do their own thing to access financial services. And then just the last point on this, the next evolution of that actually is, what happens if you don't have a phone and an email address? We take these things for granted. What happens if you don't have access to the internet? So now, there's some projects, and I'm personally becoming interested in, like the Unconnected org, who are, really supporting, widespread connectivity. And, many people probably know of the Worldwide Web Foundation, which I'm more following than interacting with, doing the same. So there's just so many flow-on effects into, so many different sectors, to make this new world work and be fair and accessible to everyone.
I have a question. I think that, well, first of all, there's an active chat, and Aisha had a question about, what do you mean by sustainability? You, and I think you had a question too. You had your microphone.
So I was going to say that e-commerce platforms are providing that access. So one example in Singapore is an e-commerce site that now sells lychees from Vietnamese farmers throughout the whole of Southeast Asia, because they've connected up through e-commerce. So I understand Meredith's point about crypto becoming the currency, or the currencies of the internet, but actually there's already an e-commerce platform available. And the fear that I have, and one of the reasons that cryptocurrency at a retail level has been banned in Singapore and has all been banned completely in China, is because of the speculative nature of and the volatility that comes with that. And we cannot afford to make poor people poorer. So I would be very cautious in promoting cryptocurrencies to poor village folk in African countries.
Sure, and I completely get that sentiment, and I think there is definitely validity in that. I think though that the evolution, so cryptocurrency is volatile. It can be speculative when it comes to a retail level. For example, you're not going to go, like, realistically, I'm not going to go to the local coffee shop and pay for my coffee in Bitcoin, because one day that might cost me $5 or £5. Another day it could actually cost me 10 if the market's changed. So I'm not going to do that. But there is a lot of innovation and evolution towards towards currencies that are either backed by central currencies. So stable coins, for example, you've got those based, there's a Singapore dollar based one, there is a US based one, and so on and so on. There's not a central bank version of these active yet, but they are in development. So this is basically like saying, I'm pegging my Bitcoin to the US dollar or a stable currency. And I think that when that, as that is happening already, that's when the utility of cryptocurrency and, you know, sort of alleviate some of those fears over time. Yeah, because what it's about is, you know, this is digitization of markets that maybe already exist. And that's the way to think about it. It's not all brand new.
Understood. Thank you.
So, Meredith, I know that sustainability is one of your key, you know, your one of your key focuses. But do you feel like all the things that you see in sort of these emerging technologies of blockchain, crypto, and Web3 are moving in the right direction? I mean, in the beginning, it was a lot of excitement, and then it turned into, oh gosh, this is actually a sustainability nightmare. And now I feel like we're seeing the storytelling that allow this to be a possibility, but we're not seeing necessarily a big change.
Sure.
Or a big move towards sustainability. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I don't think that you're far off. This is partly.
And Aisha, I wanted to know what do you mean by sustainability? What do we mean by sustainability?
Thank you, Aisha. Hello, by the way, haven't seen you for a while. So sustainability in blockchain could mean many things, but I think the headline that most people hear of is that, and I'm not going to go into what is Bitcoin mining and all of these things, but basically the way that the currency operates and the technology it operates on is a consensus mechanism. So basically lots of people and machines around the world, you know, verify a transaction, is probably, you know, confirm that transaction, and then it gets added onto the blockchain. That is a hugely energy intensive process. It just is. And especially if it's proof of work. There are currencies that have, you know, really learned from that, and, you know, are based on what we call proof of stake. Don't worry, I will put all of these into, you know, a notes for you. And they are generally less intensive on energy consumption because of the way that confirmation of the transaction happens. But in addition to that, crypto is also programmable. Sometimes it's called programmable money. And what's been happening is definitely a shift, and we're starting to hear more of these good stories where, you know, mining, Bitcoin mining or currency mining operations are not only using a different confirmation method, but they're also co-locating themselves near renewable energy sources, like physically moving towards where those energy sources are. With a lot of renewables, there's often excess, or there can be excess energy created, which can actually just go to waste. So what a lot of these organizations are doing is sort of taking that excess off the grid so that it doesn't go to waste, and then therefore, you know, ensuring that any production is always used. That's one example. Actually, I just posted an article on LinkedIn this morning or yesterday on this very topic. So I do encourage you to read, not my article, my post, but the article I referred to. But there's a lot in there around how the very basis of how Bitcoin or currencies are mined are becoming more sustainable in themselves. The other one is that because it's programmable, you can say, okay, I'm only going to do mining when there's not high demand on the energy grid. You know, so it's not affecting, you know, pricing, for example, when, you know, everyone needs their heating on. It could be done overnight, for example, and you can program that in to the algorithms that do all this mining. So there's lots of different ways that it's happening in the industry. I think up until probably just the last 6 months, the headline has mostly been that Bitcoin mining uses the same amount of energy as Liechtenstein in a year, and these sorts of things. I think we're moving away from that and coming to more balanced and sort of solutions driven things, because it does need to clean itself up. It is energy intensive, but there are many projects that we're starting to hear of that are doing that, and organizations that are building ground up to do that. They're actually building it into the design of their digital asset or crypto. But this is why I got into, like, sustainability is one thing, and then I've been in crypto the last few years. This is why I've joined these things together, because I do think there is a responsibility from the industry, but a need for the industry to make its contribution towards our future planet.
So it's still, to me, it's interesting because there's a lot of kind of back and forth about almost whether or not this is a good thing or a bad thing, some of these trends. And I don't really want to get into that so much, but what I'd really love to do is sort of bring it back to future-proofing yourself. So you, I remember, were really thinking about, you have a career as a marketer in finance, and you kind of stumbled into fintech to a certain extent. And I'm thinking about all the people I know who are not in fintech, thinking like, what am I going to do? Like, what are like the really practical things that I am going to do as, an educator or a coach, or I'm looking at, designer. I'm sort of looking at people that in a way. So Damien was saying, like, his big play has been to take all the people that are going into blockchain, that are the 20-year-olds that are sort of like ending their 2-year associate program at X big finance firm, and going into blockchain, doing a lot of copies with them, which I think is it's sort of the reverse networking. And I think that's a great idea. But what are some of the other things that you think people can do to start getting up to speed?
Yeah. So firstly, immersion and, learning by doing, I think, is probably the key here. So a couple of years ago, I didn't know anything really about crypto. But when I got into the space, I thought, okay, I'm going to open up a crypto account with a regulated exchange for me, because I want to make sure that, there are certain, safety protocols around. I bought a little bit of Bitcoin, a little bit of ETH, or Ethereum, another coin, but 3 or 4 different coins, but not in the, lofty heights of, thousands of, in the tens and hundreds. And it's, that's just a little way I thought I'll get started and do this so I can interact with the market. I can see what these platforms look like. I can follow prices, and then I start to follow news. So this is the speculative side, but for me, I'm not a speculator. I'm not a day trader. I'm a hodler, which is like buy and hold. Hodl is a crypto term for hold on to that investment, and hopefully, it increases over time. But I wasn't even really doing it for that, gain purpose. It was just to be in it and immerse myself by doing it. Since then, I've purchased my first NFT just a couple of months ago, which actually was an ex-colleague who was raising funds for a charity for a very unknown childhood disease. And there was a group called, a digital art called Pika Boys, PICA. And I bought one of those for the very first time, my first NFT. I then bought my Bamboo Works, business name on web, like a Web3 version. So bambooworks.eth. Again, cost me I think $50 or so. So I'm just dibbling and dabbling. But by doing that, I'm learning. And I do recommend that if you can and have the means to just dip your toe in the water, that's the best place to start.
Okay. Watson wants to know how he can take crypto for his services.
Sure. Well, there's actually a lot of payments organizations now, commercial, businesses that are facilitating crypto payments. So there's quite a number of them. I can give a few examples. So Square, which is now called Block. Actually, they rebranded Square to Block. They're obviously Facebook were trying to get their version up, DM, but it didn't happen and they've abandoned that now. And Wirex is another. There's quite a number that are issuing.
Sylvia said PayPal also does that now.
Yeah, and PayPal does that too. Thanks, Sylvia. Hi. So yeah, you're seeing this come into the mainstream through the usual payment networks. And all you need to do is open. I mean, I haven't actually transferred my PayPal, regular fiat currency, dollars basically, or pounds into crypto through that platform, because I do it through, my Coinbase exchange wallet.
So that's really cool. So we're coming with some sort of practical solution. So clearly, like I put the ENS domain in there, and I understand that if you buy a Web3 domain, there's a way that you can link your wallet to it, so that you don't have to give somebody like 2,000, numbers and letters. You can just have it be Meredith Odgers.eth, and people can send money to that as your wallet. And then you can, Watson's like, yeah, great, I'll get one and put it in the chat.
I haven't actually done that, just for because, it's like I am just starting out too. So I haven't actually done that yet. But yeah, Watson, maybe we can do a quick, transfer here.
And you can get paid in crypto if you want to do that via some of the things. And we'll put that in our show notes and send it out via email. And some of the other, we talked a little bit about some of the, going deep into your particular industry to find out. And I would say then another one would be to actually join communities. So yes, LinkedIn and reaching out to people, but there's actually a number of communities where you can learn more about Web3 that are on Web3. So I can think of Odyssey DAO, it's one of them, and rabbithole.gg. And basically it is a bit of learning by doing, and it's like collective learning, whereby at least in the very early days, people are actually saying, I learned this, let's put it in a, Google Doc together so that we can all learn together. Have you participated in any of those, Meredith?
Not specifically on the blockchain and crypto side, but definitely on the sustainability side. So maybe there's something there to join those things up. But I'll just give you a quick rundown of sort of just, how I've immersed myself in this learning by doing, community connection, all of those things. So for example, there's an organization called the Crypto Climate Accord, which is like a sort of a industry body of sorts. It's really just a coalition. I've just put in my application to sign up as a supporter for that, so I can start to learn about the projects that the industry is doing, to work towards net zero. I'm reached out to a couple of organizations that have working groups to see if there's any place where I can add to those and contribute, to join or be a bridge between this sort of traditional and, new digital world. Obviously there's the LinkedIn part, but then I've also, it's not just individuals, it's following companies as well, whether it's in your industry or not. So, every day or so, I probably, start to follow one or two organizations that I hear of. Like yesterday was CleanSpark, for example. And then the other thing you can do if you want to really get involved and really make this an investment in your future, there's quite a number of certification programs that are out there, maybe industry specific, maybe quite broadly. So one that I've signed up to do a certification on is with Manchester CF, who do anti-financial crime education, anti-money laundering type stuff. One module is related to crypto, but other modules are also related to things like financial crime, like human trafficking and ESG type, wildlife trafficking, environmental crime, etc. So I'm just starting on that journey to do that. So I think there's a number of ways that you can do that. There's other Discord, I think you mentioned. Telegram is like another one where you find like lots of like groups as well. And so just a Clubhouse, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening there. So just start to, poke around and you'll start to hear the same names, see the same companies and start to just get comfortable.
I think that there, as somebody who's, sort of has the future of work bent, if there are things that are interesting, I'm seeing more and more of the different companies who are, hiring and compensating people on a fractional basis for involvement in projects. So that's another way, a sort of immersion way to say, hey, I really like this project. I was talking to somebody about a Web3 community for women on boards, for instance. And so, being able to get a collective of different people who maybe somebody could do the programming and they would be, they would be compensated by NFTs or, some kind of thing that they could then on sell. For crypto, or they'd be compensated by tokens or whatever it is. So I do think that there is this sort of learning by doing aspect as well. Do we have any questions? Aisha, did you want to ask your question?
I'll have to just check the chat. I've forgotten. Oh yeah, there we go. DeFi. Yeah, so I've been hearing the term DeFi, if that's even the way you say it, bandied about. Is that exactly the same as what we're talking about here?
So DeFi is one flavor of blockchain and crypto and digital assets. NFTs and that market is another. But what DeFi generally is at its most basic level is it's often taking products as we know it, like securities investment or securities investment. There's also lending and borrowing type products that we all know of in the traditional either personal, corporate or investment banking systems. And it's taking those and digitizing them in a sense. So it's making them, they are converted into and sort of minted with a token. And so that there is this exchange of these, sometimes underlying assets that are either physical or could be collateralized by, securities and things. But it's cutting out a lot of that inefficiency and middlemen and also all the counterparties. If you think about the clearing houses, the exchanges, that whole sort of ecosystem on the institutional asset side, if you can just transfer those things directly between counterparties, then it's much more efficient. The ownership is very clear because you have a digital footprint. I mean, one of the biggest myths about crypto is that it's not transparent. Actually, it's way more transparent than our traditional money systems because it's recorded on the blockchain and you can't change that. So really, DeFi it's many other things, but in the most simple way to summarize, it's taking traditional financial services products and putting them into sort of digital formats to transact with them.
All right, thank you, Meredith. Taya, do you want to ask your question? I just saw you pop something into the chat. Take back your data.
Hi, I was just interested in what Scott said at the beginning, and you too, Meredith, about how Web 3 is about sort of giving ownership back to individuals of their data? Like, obviously, we've talked about financially and ownership of assets and transfer of assets and being able to monetize time and giving people who might not have access to financial services access to. So I understand all of that, but it sounded a bit more sort of to do with identity as well, like people kind of, you know, like maybe a reaction against the Facebooks and the social media sites kind of, you know, owning us and our profiles and our digital footprint. So is there something more than just kind of ownership of assets and transfer of assets that Web3 could do for us in terms of having more control over our online profiles and footprints?
Scott, do you want to talk a little bit about that since you're investing in that?
Yeah, I would touch on it. And a bit, Meredith, you said you're not technical like a blockchain developer. Neither am I. So take this with a grain of salt. But you know, I'll go back to in really simple terms, and I really like this. And if this makes sense, Web 1 was read only. Web 2 was read and write. Web 3 is read, write, own. So I just wanted to say that before I touched on the data point there. Web3 is going to give us choice for the first time on what we do with our data, rather than having Facebook and Google and whoever know more about us than we do and sell that to the highest bidder, and it goes out with no consent, no control, no awareness, nothing. We will be able to control that, and we will be asked and we'll be given choice as to what, if any, ads we see and how we see them at the very basic level around marketing. And so we'll be able to opt in. And instead of some company paying Google a whole bunch of money for that, we'll get paid it'll only be a micro stream of value, but we will receive that value if we want it. When you think about the data play here, there's so many data unions is absolutely massive. And someone in a underdeveloped country who's very poor but has a smartphone connected to the internet can take a photo of a tree somewhere and geotag that, and that tree can go into a data union and they might get a trickle of this reward for that. That is an example of value generation in a Web3 world. I'm really struggling talking to my peers here in Sydney what Web3 means. And when I say, hey, just change your behavior online and use this browser instead of this one, and you'll get a cup of coffee worth trickling into a wallet somewhere every week. It's not enough for you and I to really want to do something with that. But if we access 4 or 5 or 6 of them and then give that to, or donate that, or share that, or provide access to that to other people, to some many points about sustainability and about poor people, I think there's a massive opportunity. And this is the disruption that I think is afoot and coming, and this is the distribution of wealth from the few to the many. I think that was a long answer. I hope it made sense.
Yeah, and actually, it's funny that you mentioned the browser. That's one example there, Scott, because so basically, we all know the big algorithms that sit behind the big mainstream web browsers. There's browsers like brave.com that is ad-free, music to my ears, but also when you're using that browser, you can earn these what they call basic attention tokens, BATs. For this, everything has an acronym in this world, and then you can redeem those, just as Scott mentioned, for, well, things that are of value to you, which are a range of things that they do with that. So that's just like one example that we could do in our everyday lives.
Thank you. Annie, we have time for one last question, and it's all you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Meredith. It's very interesting to listen to you. I unfortunately joined a little bit later, and excuse me if I'm repeating something, but my question is around, so what is next for cryptocurrencies and blockchain, and where is this going? What time? And are these the digital money, like digital euro, digital dollar? So a little bit of a horizon here to understand what are we talking about, because the technology is amazing, but it seems that we don't know yet how to use it properly. And properly is not the right word. I just can't find another one.
No, that's okay. So I think one of the things that we're seeing, and the world moves so fast here that looking into a crystal ball, probably be obsolete, tomorrow. There's often a saying that a week in, crypto is like 5 or a year in some other parts of the other sectors, sorry. And it is true, the pace of innovation and change is quite mind-boggling. However, I'll just put a scenario to you. We all have cash accounts and we use the cash to transact. That sits in, a high street retail bank. We used to have the physical cash a lot in our wallet. Then we had cards and, point of sale type, devices where that would all be done sort of digitally in payments networks in the background. Then, and you had to put in a PIN in for that. Now you can just tap a card, contactless, or you can have a wallet, a Google or an Apple or whatever wallet on your phone, and you can use that. I don't even need the card anymore. I'm just imagining a world where my teenager in 10 years, 15, 20, I don't know what the time horizon will be, we'll just be transacting with digital-based currencies in the same way as we transact with, like what they call fiat currencies, which are things like dollars, pounds, like money as we know it today. I don't think that world's too far away. As that happens, and those digital currencies are issued by central banks, like Bank of America, the Federal Reserve, or Bank of Australia, Bank of the UK, etc., Bank of England, sorry. As that happens, businesses will have an option to transform their technology networks on which they transact, and then so it goes on to become mainstream. So I think that we'll start to interact with not cryptocurrencies, which is sort of that sort of very speculative, unstable kind of world that has got some concerns with the stability of that, but with stable digital currencies. Just for the term CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, is the term or the acronym for that. China's far advanced, probably one of the closest to making that real, but most other central monetary systems are getting quite a bit of headway as well.
That was a great question, and I think very relevant about horizons, because there is this sense like, how early is it? How much do I really need to know? Can I wait for a few months and really start to think about it later? So we had a wide-ranging conversation, and it definitely, everybody is at completely differing levels. For some, from this could be interesting, but do I really even want to know about it, to people who are more advanced in thinking about how they want to really integrate it into their career. So thank you so much, Meredith, for putting it together. Thank you, Scott, so much also for your comments. Thank all of you guys for everything. We're going to put all the questions and the things that we have in the chat into basically a takeaway, some notes that you can have, that you can kind of use to get started in terms of information, in terms of things. I would say three things as we wrap up to summarize that you can do now to future-proof yourself as a blockchain or Web3 savvy leader. And that is, to paraphrase, total immersion, learn by doing. I would say get yourself a wallet. That experience makes you realize just how early crypto is, in my opinion. But get connected, overcome your imposter syndrome, connect to Scott and Meredith, connect to other people in the space, in your industry, and then find your flavor. Digital transformation happens differently in different industries, from sustainability to art to supply chain. So 3 ways to get started, and you'll have a lot more when we send you the email later. So thank you guys all for participating. And if there's any other things you want to see in the Future Proof Masterclass, then please let us know. Thank you.